25, I learned about mental illness for myself. I never learned about it in my junior high school, or at university. I had to learn about it when I couldn't ignore it any longer. At 25, I suffered a nervous breakdown brought on by intense anxiety. By the end, I was down to 2 hours of sleep a night, trapped in a constant cycle of negative thinking that I couldn't break out of. When I went to my community health center, I was told I have to wait 6 months to see a qualified therapist. I was sent to a self-help group where I was the only person in attendance, where help was a human pamphlet reading a PowerPoint presentation without paraphrasing a single sentence. Imagine looking for help and not being able to find it. It took the people in my life to remind me who I was when I forgot. Everyone tells us to talk about mental illness, but we rarely get a clear picture of what life is actually like for people living with mental illness. In the media, we almost exclusively tell the success stories of celebrities who accomplish their miracles despite the obstacles in their way, or we talk about murderous psychopaths who society failed to help, or homeless people, men and women who can't help themselves. We're either inspiring, terrifying, or objects of pity. We are whatever sells newspapers that week. 2 out of 3 people who suffer mental illness don't seek help due to stigma. Our brothers, sisters, and best friends are scared to tell us what they're going through because they think we won't understand. We have to make the effort to understand. You have to make the effort to make the world understand. We need to redefine what a happy ending is. Hope is getting up in the morning. Hope is getting out of the house. Hope is remaining alive when you can't remember what it is to be happy. Hope is taking one of 1,000 steps back to yourself. Hope is when we can make people understand for 1 second the burden of other people and actually make them care. These diseases are more common than most of us realize. So is recovery. Every day we get out of bed, we take 1 step back to life. It isn't a miracle that we get better. It's an everyday occurrence too boring for most of you to write about. If I had a dream, it's that we'd start talking about how life is, rather than just how it's supposed to be. Every time you try to make life fit a story, you're just selling advertisements. There's a problem with violence and the mentally ill, and it gets worse every time we ignore it. Journalists feel comfortable talking about murder, but we can't talk about suicide. Right now, suicide is the leading cause of violent death in Canada. 4,000 people die of suicide every year in Canada. Silence comes both before and after suicide, and it's the silence before that we need to deal with most. To begin the conversation with our youth, to break the shame that is the foundation of so many of these afflictions. I want you to make the politicians talk about mental illness in Parliament, in city halls, and in cabinet meetings, to make the government educate our children when they're going through puberty and experiencing those first changes, when they're in high school and university, when most mental illnesses set in. Today we're talking about it. I want you to make this conversation mean something. I went to King's College and grew up and watched friends become adults and die as children. No one ever told me about mental illness. It's up to you to tell everybody.